Dr. Justin Frank thinks that Donald Trump is essentially admitting to having stolen the 2016 election. Check it out. Leave your comments, ding the bell, share it with your friends, and subscribe to our channel. Justin Frank, the author of Trump on the Couch, Bush on the Couch, Obama on the Couch, some really remarkable stuff. And Dr. Frank, in the 5 or so minutes that we have left in this hour, how can America most effectively insulate itself against future psychopaths in the White House or in other, high public office?
Well, it's a complicated thing. I mean, first of all, people can insulate themselves. I don't know if you can insulate yourself, but if you can comment in public that you had been fooled, that you had been tricked. I'm not a big fan of Tom Friedman, for instance, but I really do admire him for saying that he made a mistake about Iraq and about believing Colin Powell and believing George Bush. I mean, he really was banging the drums for war in 2003 and 4. But he finally admitted that it was a big mistake. He was fooled. He was wrong. That takes courage. I think that one of the things about psychopaths is that we either have to have been fooled and can admit it, like Neville Chamberlain probably never lent a psychopath $5, whereas Churchill probably did, so he knew that Hitler was a psychopath, whereas Neville Chamberlain hoped they could negotiate with him. And so he didn't understand that. He felt that we could work it out, but you can't negotiate with a psychopath. You have to accept the fact that you can't. Mitch McConnell is a psychopath. He's a classic psychopath, but he does it much more subtly than Trump does. But you can't negotiate with him. You can't. I mean, you think you can.
He's a sophisticated psychopath.
But he's a sophisticated psychopath. He's a subtle psychopath. He doesn't have an ounce of compassion.
Do you think that psychopathy tends to become like basically the price of admission to a political party when it gets captured by other psychopaths?
Well, I think it does. I think the one thing that's great that Donald Trump has done for the Republican Party is wonderful, that he said things that they've been afraid to say. He's overtly racist. He's overtly sexist. He's overtly a person who is, a little bit like Reagan, only not nice. I mean, Reagan said government is the problem. That's what a psychopath does. The problem is my mommy or my daddy who tells me I have to do my homework. They're the problem. I'll do it if you don't tell me. I'll wear a mask on my own, but if you tell me to wear one, I'm never going to do it. Never.
Do you think Reagan was a psychopath, or was he just a really good actor who was saying the lines that the billionaire class was giving him?
I think he was a psychopath. And I think there's some examples of that we probably don't have time to go into. But in terms of the way he talked about the SALT I treaty and how somebody handed him a document of the SALT I treaty that he had lied about. And he looked at the document and he says to the other person, this is a forgery. That's a psychopath. He can't see the fact in front of him. I wanted to say something before we stop about the danger of projection, because Trump is always projecting. He's the pot calling the kettle black, all these things that we hear. And this is very much of a technique that the Nazis used, that Goebbels wrote about, which is that you always tell people you are always on the attack, and you actually attack other people for doing things you're doing. And I suddenly had this horrible thought that I just want to share with you or whoever is listening, that maybe all this talk about being robbed of the election and how Biden and the deep state stole the election suddenly made me think, is that a projection? Did he steal the 2016 election? Maybe that's what we're talking about. I never thought about that until this last week, and it was bone-chilling thought, let me tell you.
Yeah, nobody really seriously looked into those 10,000 vote margins in Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin back in 2016.
No, nobody did, because we trust. You don't become may be a good political participant in our democracy until you lend a psychopath $5. Maybe it applies to all of us, not just the people who are in the psychiatric residency program. I think that there's a real fear of facing things like that because we don't want to face the parts of us that can be psychopathic. And so we assume that other people are like us. But the fact is that Trump is not like the rest of us. He really isn't. He's somewhat like a CEO, but he's not even like a CEO. He's really like a mob boss more than anybody.